Welcome everyone, it is 3 p.m. and it's time for the server room show. This is episode 34. I would like to say quickly first that this episode is pre-recorded and as some good news, it looks like that very soon this server room show you will be able to catch on or listen to on another radio station as well, not just on radio station. Hopefully very soon it will be dual streaming to Tilde Radio as well, and also Tilde Radio will do some reruns of previous episodes of the server room show. So I would like to welcome the Tilde Radio community as well, and the more we are, the better it is, the more the merrier. So it's good to see that this little project, so to say, it's getting a wider audience with the inclusion of Tilde Radio. So today's topic, I really hope I'm going to be able to fit into one episode. If not, I will have to break it into two. It's about emulation of Forgotten Realms. I will mention a couple of software for emulation of different systems or architectures. I didn't really talk about these applications this much in detail before. The only thing that I did include a lot of links and even screenshots in the show notes, because as I will touch on more than one, it would be pretty impossible to try to show them live as part of the videocast when we are discussing it, because there are just many to mention. So for that reason I did leave in the links YouTube videos or tutorials how to set some of the things up and running, and there are some good tutorials and links for diving deeper into this rabbit hole. So the first one I want to mention is two applications actually, PCem and 86box. 86box is actually forked from PCem. They are similar in things and different in another. What both of them does is being a low-level PC emulator to emulate a whole computer from an early one, as early as an 8080 American Megatrends XT clone up to a Socket 7 Pentium from 1995. It also emulates some graphics and sound cards as well, and also can emulate some interesting models. The ones I'm more fascinated with to mention from those lists, mainly the IBM PS1 and PS2 models. I left, as I mentioned, links in the show notes where you can even find the list of currently emulated systems. To achieve all this, you need to use the corresponding ROM files for emulated systems, the BIOS ROMs and ROMs for peripherals like graphic cards and sound cards and whatnot. And I also left a link in the show notes for those. You can use them. There is one for PCem and one for 86box. They use somehow different, a bit different in the ROM folder structure. So you can just download these and use as they are not provided on their website. While not everything and every combination works or will work 100% and without certain flaws, it's quite a well-rounded and perfectly usable emulator when you need to emulate a whole system or a computer. Sometimes maybe you need to fine-tune and change some settings or choose another combination of hardware components which best suits your intended software or operating system you wish to use with the emulated computer. And once in a while it can be that that piece of software you wish to run on this emulated computer, for example under MS-DOS 3.21, just don't play 100% well with this kind of emulation itself. It can happen. So but most importantly, we are talking about free and open source software. So for being free and not costing you a cent, it's definitely nice and pretty usable, and you can spend hours and hours putting together your dream machine and configuration with the software you hunted down on those abandonware links. I left a link for one of the biggest one, WinWord library, so you can feel like it's the 80s and 90s again. And honestly, looking at the prices of real hardware from that era, which are still around, and you can purchase in sites like eBay and Craigslist or whatnot, if you are able to find a good and working model of the hardware of your choice, not even mentioning those very special ones like the IBM PS2s or like a branded computer from that era of the XT or 286 or 386, even 486 ones, like a proper Dell or a real original compact machine. I'm not saying about the clones. Definitely those branded machines are really going for a high premium, even here in Spain or in Europe in general. So compared to that, this emulation or this option of emulating it with the hit and miss and the success it can emulate it with, it's definitely a cheaper option in this sense to get your feet wet, so to say. And if you more serious about it, then of course, by all means, if you can afford and if you can grab some of those hardware, you definitely have to go for it. But keep in mind that some of those hardware which were peculiar or special, so to say, in the kind of add-on cards or the system itself, that like the IBM PS2s, which were not really following the rest of the computers, or didn't follow the in the steps of those footsteps of the standards of that era. It can be quite hard to find the proper add-on card or bits and pieces, and by being unique, you can see that it can drive the price to incredible amounts of money. Personally, when I got acquainted with the PCem and 86 box, all I wanted to do is to run AIX 1.3, which did exist back in the day for IBM PS2 computers. And however, I obtained the disks and everything, but my installer was getting kernel panics, and I could never actually install or anything. This was the last time when I tried, and it was just failing and failing. It was probably also my inexperience with this, and probably I could have googled some more around. But these IBM PS2s are strange machines, and in a good sense of the word. However, I spent some more time on it, and I did came around another solution I will share in a second. But first, I want to tell you one difference between PCem and 86box. PCem doesn't handle LPT printing. On PCem you can add an LPT port device, but these LPT connected I don't know if they were called sound cards or some sound devices like this Roland and Disney was it probably these sound card or sound devices. I don't know the proper word. I will put it in the show notes in the updates. What's the proper name of those modules? So PCem handle those, but it doesn't do printers through LPT. It neither does LPT or LPT port redirection to perhaps to a file or to let another piece of software catch it. And actually that's one thing which sometimes I need from under this let's say for example from these MS-DOS applications, to be able to send something to an LPT port and a compatible application, or the emulation software itself to redirect it either into a file or to do what's needed to do to that output or raw data be implemented in a way, so either with the help of an additional software or itself to be able to obtain that printout. And I was checking that in 86box indeed there is LPT printer emulation. One of them is called the generic text printer and another one is called generic PostScript compatible printer. And I think I saw something about dot matrix, something like that. I was spending pretty much good half of the afternoon today trying to make it work with there's a piece of software I left the link in the show notes called Printfill. It's a paid software, but you can download it and try before you buy it for 30 days, and probably could even use it for more, but the around $40 it costs. If I were able to make it work, I know that it would be a great addition and it would totally worth the money. I was trying to make it work under Windows to try to get some documents printing through LPT1 through 86box and to be captured somehow with Printfill, this application under Windows. I was not successful, but it's again just me and the need to spend more time, and probably at some point I can update the show notes to let you know how it went. On their website of Printfill there is examples how to set it up and some videos, and when you Google Printfill and for example the Printfill and DOS application or something like that, it brings up quite a few results, so I'm sure you can do that. Also, I'm sure that under Linux and BSD systems perhaps there are other kind of applications or ways to try to capture and redirect those LPT or even COM ports from 86box, even PCem if it would handle them, but PCem at the moment doesn't. It would be awesome if PCem would spend some effort on that and make it a bit easier, because it is great to use these old text editors or spreadsheet apps or whatever in, for example, DOS or OS2 or wherever, and to be able to print on LPT port, because not everything or from everywhere you can print on a network printer, of course. So the main difference between PCem and 86box, that 86box does handle some LPT printer emulations compared to PCem. And regarding that AIX, that 1.3, I will comment another alternative solution I found with some googling. The next batch of applications are kind of like we can call them DOS emulators. There are a bunch with some are forks of already existing ones, like there is one called the DOSBOX, and there are forks of it like DOSBOX SV and Daum and DOSBOX Mega Build. Then there are some other ones like TameDOS and VDOS and VDOS Plus. Because sometimes all you need is just a DOS prompt, a proper DOS prompt to run some applications with networking and options to mount folders from your local machine, and you just don't want to spend time emulating the whole computer around those chosen operating systems. You want to run as it is, the case with 86box and PCem. You just want an easier or a simple solution, a quicker solution, not to hassle with trying to emulate the whole computer, like a 286 or a 386, for example. And a little bit the situation is a bit similar amongst these applications, like the ones we discussed in 86 and PCem. So for those LPT1 discussions we just had a bit above, the situation is similar to PCem and 86box. Some of these DOSBox variants, VDOS Plus, if I remember correctly, does LPT1 redirection to file or to an app, like printfill in Windows, to say as an example, the one I was trying to work with 86box in the previous example. Handles the things as well. So perhaps if it's a must in your workflow, the LPT1, then VDOS Plus, if I remember correctly, is a good fit, or perhaps it's a better fit for you than going with this whole system emulation of 86box or PCem, because if you just need a piece of software, just that one concrete piece of software, then perhaps before you dive into 86box and PCem, maybe you grab VDOS Plus if you need printing, or if you're not, then just grab DOSBox and copy those files for your application, extract them from the floppy images, put it in a folder on your computer, share it to DOSBox in this example, and so to say install it or run it in DOSBox and see how it works. And maybe as much as I tried, I have to say that most of the apps I tried under these variants of DOSBox worked with great success and joy. So it was very quick to be up and running, and to use some of those old favorite DOS applications. I didn't have to worry about ROM files. I didn't have to make sure that the configuration and the BIOS itself, like in 86box and PCem, you have to get into the BIOS, make sure that your settings are correct. You have to make sure that the other CMOS settings, like the memory and the time and everything, is okay, and format the hard drive and everything. You don't have to worry about any of those in applications like DOSBox and VDOS Plus. You just put the application there, make sure you can access it from DOSBox, and there you go. It's very, 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 very quick, and in a sense it has somehow a better integration, or interchanging certain things with the host operating system. So in the case if you run on Windows operating system, DOSBox or VDOS Plus, or under like Linux or BSD, it interacts, and the chance to get files and like I mentioned, the LPT printouts from these applications, it seems a bit easier than with this whole system, whole PC low-level emulations like 86box and PCem, where it's not just perfect just yet. And as you see, there are still a lot of companies out there using legacy applications, and hence why the demand for legacy hardware and operating systems and architectures, as well as their cost-effective emulation as an alternative, as you will see further along in this episode, where and whenever possible are in demand. Some companies just cannot move away from legacy hardware, software or architectures, many times because of cost involved, or because it would be a mammoth undertaking of a project, resulting even more costs, or sometimes the good old rule of it is, if it is not broken, do not fix it. And I completely agree with that statement. After this DOSBox kind of like these DOS emulators, so to say, pretty and quick DOS emulators, I would like to talk about Qemu. And I already see, I'm just gonna say right now, that there is no way I'm gonna fit all this into one episode. It's just gonna be impossible. We have around 8 minutes 50 left. So there is definitely gonna be a part 2, and let's hope there is not gonna be a part 3. The show notes is long, and I was afraid it's not gonna be long enough for an episode. Qemu can emulate a plethora of architectures, and you can run a lot of different operating systems. It's true, some runs so slow, probably you will never want to run it again. I definitely had success and pain following a step-by-step to install HPUX 32-bit Unix under Qemu on an emulated Basilisk 32-bit CPU, where just the text-only install took more than 4 hours, and it's not a lie. The system does boot after and works, but very, very, very painfully slow. Good thing is that Qemu is getting better each time, so there is always a promise that things get better there. Also, for example, I have AIX 7.2 Unix, installing and booting fine under Qemu, emulating a power architecture. I have to use a specific Qemu build, which is quite an older one than the current one in their build, and also this AIX 7.2 ISO, which I have to use, or you have to use if you want to try this. Has to be a specially prepped one, where the required Qemu drivers are injected into this ISO. Otherwise, what would happen that you get kernel panic when you try to boot this thing. If I remember correctly, it's the network and the disk drivers which are getting injected into the ISO to make it prepared, so to say, for running under Qemu. And if you have it all, then that baked installer ISO will both install and can power up afterwards with relatively correct normal speed, I would say. The installation took about like 20 minutes, and after a boot up around let's say 5 minutes. Networking works. You can set up networking, you can connect out, and you can connect back inside from out. You can SSH into your AIX box, for example, and it's relatively easy to set up. I left in the links the original tutorial I was following of a blog called astrobaby.wordpress.com, and many of those tutorials I mentioned or systems I mentioned came from there. Even better examples can be older SunOS operating systems. Some of them can be a bit sluggish in performance, but definitely worth trying out and playing with, unless you have the real Sun hardware, because that would be the best, to be honest. All the above, AIX, HPUX, and SunOS, steps by steps for Qemu. As I said, you can find on the mentioned links, part of the show notes, and they all come from Astrobaby's WordPress blog, where he shared how he did these installations of these operating systems. And honestly, there is always something interesting to read there each time I visit his blog. And now the next section I will briefly mention, because we are running out of time slowly, is the ones when, for example, you want to emulate those old Macintosh hardware, those Motorola 68K hardware. One of their main contestant in software front to use when you want to do something like this is like Basilisk 2, which is, as I just said, an open source 68K Macintosh emulator. That is, it allows you to run 68K macOS software on your computer even if you are using a different operating system. However, you still need a copy of macOS and the Macintosh ROM image to use Basilisk 2. And Google definitely can help you find all the necessary files and ROM images. It emulates either a Mac Classic, which runs macOS 0.x up to 7.5, or a Mac 2 series machine, which runs macOS 7.x, 8.0 and 8.1, depending on the ROM being used. I left a big good amount of links to tutorials and videos how to set up and configure Basilisk 2. Most of these tutorials are either for Windows or for macOS, but you can still get hints and important gotchas even if you are under a different system like Linux and BSDs, because most probably it's just differ in the way to achieve that same thing which is explained how they do it in the example under Windows or macOS operating system. So I think with a bit of thinking and googling and trying, it can help, even though it's not under the same operating system. It can help you find the key points to concentrate on, to how to achieve, like for example networking in Basilisk 2 through your host machine. It came in handy for me as I prepared the separate Windows 7 virtual machine under VirtualBox to try out Basilisk 2 and Shaver, which is another Macintosh emulator. I was trying it on the FreeBSD laptop I recently set up, and I spoke about the previous episode, the Lenovo X220. Shaver is another one, which is a pun on a previous software which was called Shapeshifter, which was a 68K Mac emulator for Amiga OS and obsoleted by Basilisk 2. Shapeshiver originally appeared for BOS in 1998 as a commercial application, first as shareware, then via the now long defunct B depot. Due to the demise of B, it has been re-released in 2002 as open source software under the GPL. And sometimes tutorials which explains Basilisk 2 can be most of the time used for Shapeshiver as well, or vice versa, as Basilisk 2 was building on the way how Shapeshiver was doing. So Basilisk 2 made Shapeshiver obsolete. So many of the how-tos and how to do certain things can be used for Shapeshiver as well. And you saw that both of these were Motorola 68K emulators, and as the time is up, next Saturday in part 2 of this emulation part or emulation episode, I will continue from here, from the Mac section, with one for another one for 68K and one for PowerPC, and then we continue on from there a bit more. Thank you very much for listening, and see you next Saturday.